I used to work as an actress before I started building, and I retrained in video as a camera operator, and I worked in advertising and industrial video. So that's what I used to do, and I got to hear of, but all the while I was living in very sort of simple housing, and before I joined the group, and before when I was still an actress, I was squatting basically, and squatting is where you just, when I first arrived in London, there were lots of empty houses, and that's how I started living in London, and lots of people were able to do that at that time. But as time went on, then we got to hear of what they call short life housing, whereby you pay a very small amount of rent, but once again you're living in sort of fairly substandard, well, very substandard housing. But when you're young, you don't notice that the roof leaks and that the walls are damp and the floors have got holes in them and all that sort of thing. And so, but the short life housing movement was the one thing that connected all of us here with the self-build project here that we built, because you had to be living in short life housing to sort of qualify. And so I was living in this wonderful old house, a women-only house in my part of Islington, and we had lots of fun, and the neighbours hated us because we were a bit wild. And this all went on, and then I realised, well, I can't live like this forever. And I can't remember now, I think there was a meeting at my local, through the housing association that I was part of, about this self-build idea. And so I thought, oh, I'll go along to that. And I think quite a few people in the group had been to some sort of meeting where Islington Council was talking about this idea of you can build your own house. And it seemed such a fantastic idea. And I had, lots of my friends were sort of arty people, and I always had quite a few friends who were architects. So I asked them about it, and they all went, oh, it's great, yes, you've got to do it. So I had lots of enthusiastic people encouraging me to become part of this self-build housing group, and that's how I got started.
Camden had Camden Community Housing, and there was the same over in Hackney. You know, there were organisations who would agree to move people in and gave them permits to live on, providing when the council wanted to develop, they could move. They would immediately move out, and it didn't work out like that, because the councils were eventually rate capped during Maggie Thatcher and her Conservative government, and councils didn't have enough money, and they could never put any council schemes which hadn't been done yet, couldn't be done.
Got my things around me, they're my things, and I don't want to have them. Not everybody who was a squatter was a thief, but some of the squatters were thieves and opportunists. And in those days you heard many stories of squats being re-broken into, and squats being taken over, and you know, it was quite a mafia little industry, the squatting circumstance. I've helped to break into quite a few squats, but I couldn't live in one.
Those that were standing up were still pre-war, and really the councils who had responsibility for decent housing for families, they couldn't build fast enough, and there wasn't enough money, and etc. And consequently, groups of people the squatters just moved into housing that could be, you know, made a little habitable, you know, sort of damp, and you put a tarpaulin in there and you mend a bit there. That was the squatting. But then groups of what I'd say were young graduates. And the point thing about young graduates, we were the first generation. I was a bit older at that time, but I was still part of the first generation that got free education beyond school age.
Sort of inspired by, there was this architect, I think he's Swiss or something, called Walter Siegel, and he had developed this idea of ordinary people building their own house, very much out of a timber frame construction. And the main thing that he did was that he made these flat roofs that were easy to build, that you put on top of your house, obviously. And but it meant the construction was much easier. And there was another scheme that had done this kind of. It was designed by a sort of someone who knew Walter Siegel, an architect called John Broome, and he was part of a group of architects called Archetype, and that's who we ended up using to design all the houses here. And I remember it was summer when we started, and we arrived on the site, and the site had been prepared for us already, so the foundations had been laid, so we didn't have to dig the foundations. We just started to do the blocks that made the walls of all our houses. And that's how we started. And the sun was shining and it was all wonderful. And if you look at the photographs from back there, we've all got big smiles on our faces, and some of the women are even wearing lipstick, which that all changed. And then the first winter, it was like, okay, yes, it's cold. So we bit by bit realised that this was going to be a hard process. So then we passed the first winter, and then we realised there's no way we're going to get it done in a year and a half, or even 2 years, which is what they said it would take. And in fact, it took nearly over 3 years to build them all, and it was a very big project.
And other people did try, and some people were successful. Other groups of self-builders at the same time were unsuccessful and didn't complete their things. Their arguments and their inability to get on meant they couldn't complete the projects. There was one in Hackney actually that couldn't be completed.
It was easy for me to work as a community. I quite enjoy teamwork and that sort of thing, and physical work. I spent a lot of time here on the site. The painting, I was an artist, took a background role because I was so motivated to do this. I would spend most days here.
I found it a really fulfilling process. For three years, over 3 years we were on site here, and I just loved every minute of it. I liked the whole process of taking something from the beginning to the end and building it up. I liked watching the diversity of other people, the women, the men, the older people, the younger people, all operating at different levels, at their different speeds. I mean, it was the case that 5 or 6 of us, had to do all the heavy work. Like, we put all the roofs on, we put all the floors in, and people who couldn't do such heavy work by the nature of their bodies, they did the lighter work. So we all kind of identified where our skills would go, and it was a really cohesive, understanding and sympathetic group. What's that saying they have? Every man in his life should plant a tree, have a child, and build a house. So I've built my house. I've got a son too, but I've built my house. It was a really fulfilling exercise for me.
I love looking at the house, and it transports me. It's because it looks architecturally designed, and it's a very attractive building. So it's a bit of escapism. You come into my house and you're out of the real world, and you see this sort of like nice area.
Life is short, sometimes cruel. Like ghosts, we slip away.